The hospital room looked like it had borrowed its calm from the sea. Pale blue walls. A single framed print of a shoreline. The steady hush of the air vent turning the room into a soft machine of breath. I sat propped against crisp pillows, hands on my belly, counting the seconds between small tightenings that felt like a shadow of what was coming. A nurse checked the monitors and told me I was early, to rest if I could, to sip water, to let the baby slide closer to the idea of the world. Daniel was supposed to be here. I had picked this hospital because he liked the coffee in the lobby and said it smelled like caramel. That felt like a good omen at the time. Something easy. A detail to hang hope on. At home, he had packed the overnight bag carefully, folding the baby's first onesie like a tiny flag. He had kissed my forehead and said, "This is it, we are doing this." Then contractions began as a whisper, and our plan unfolded the way we had rehearsed. Call. Shower. Bag. Car. Except the shower took longer than it should have, and the car keys were not on the hook, and somewhere between the front door and his phone lighting up, his eyes slid away from mine. I texted him when the nurse stepped out. "On my way," he replied, the message arriving with a small ding that felt like relief. "Traffic is slow, but I am coming." He added a heart, the kind he uses when he wants to be more affectionate than precise. I placed the phone on the tray table, breathed through another tightening, and turned my head toward the window. Outside, a winter sun tried to look warm. People crossed the parking lot with coffee cups and scarves, their lives briefly framed by the window's edge. A father held a bouquet and a car seat, bright with tiny stars. A woman in scrubs ate a banana while walking, her eyes half closed. The glass separated me from them, as if I were underwater and they were moving through air. The nurse returned and adjusted the strap around my belly. "How are you feeling, Emily?" "Like my body is learning a language I do not speak yet," I said. She smiled. "That is exactly how it starts." Time became elastic, stretching and snapping back. I breathed. I shifted. I drank. I watched the monitor numbers climb and fall like tides. The tightenings turned to contractions with teeth. I texted again. No answer. The room clock blinked soft red numbers that seemed to mock the word soon. The doctor stepped in, her voice gentle and practiced. "Early labor," she said. "We will let your body lead." "Has your partner arrived?" "He is on the way," I said, and tried to make my voice sound confident. I did not say that he had been on the way for an hour. I did not say that each minute felt like a drawer being shut in my chest. The next contraction made me grip the rail. I counted to 10, then to 12, then to a number that had no name. Sweat gathered at my hairline. The nurse placed a cool cloth on my forehead and said, "That is it. Good. Stay with the breath." I nodded and realized my teeth were clenched. I forced my jaw to soften. At some point the door opened and a different nurse entered with a clipboard. She looked around the room as if searching for something that was not there. For a moment I thought she was going to check the monitor. Instead, she held out an envelope. "This was left at the desk for you," she said quietly. The envelope was plain and thin. No name on the outside. My fingers did not want to touch it. I took it anyway and slid a nail under the flap. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded once. The first line hooked my breath before I could read the rest. "I cannot do this." The rest of the words swam. I had to blink a few times to make them settle into legible shapes. He said he was sorry. He said he was not ready to be a father. He said he thought leaving now was kinder than failing later. He said he would send money. He said he hoped I could forgive him. He said he hoped the baby would have my eyes. The words stacked on top of each other until they no longer made a sentence, only a weight. The room did not tilt. It narrowed. The bed sheets felt too tight. The air turned thin enough that I could see through it. The nurse with the clipboard had the careful face of someone who has stood in too many rooms where shock has just taken root. She squeezed my shoulder. I am so sorry, Emily. Another contraction arrived like a wave with no shoreline. My body folded around it, the paper crumpling in my fist. The monitor beeped faster. The nurse moved quickly, the cool cloth returning to my forehead, the hand at my back steady. You are not alone, she said. You are doing this. We are right here. I tried to find a word that was not why. I tried to find a breath that was not a sob. The doctor came back, her eyes flicking to the envelope, then to my face. She did not ask questions. Her focus shifted to the rhythmic urgency on the screen. Things were moving faster now. She spoke in tones designed to anchor. We are going to transition soon. I need you to stay with us. The window was no longer a picture of other lives. It was a mirror that showed me my own. My belly rose under my hands. I thought of the tiny onesie in the bag by the door at home. I thought of the crib I had built with him, asking him to pass the little screws, both of us laughing when we dropped the last one and spent 10 minutes searching the floor. I thought of the smell of caramel in the lobby, the way it had seemed to bless this place. I thought of the word father and how it had just slipped out of my life like a fish through a broken net. A wheelchair appeared, and the nurse said, "It is time to move to delivery. Can you swing your legs to the side?" The world reorganized into corridor, lights, hands, wheels. The clock above the door flashed another number that meant nothing to me. As they pushed me into the hallway, I saw the waiting room. There was a man sitting alone with his hands clasped, staring at the floor like he was memorizing the pattern. He looked up as I passed. Not surprise, not pity, something steadier. His eyes held mine for a breath, and then the double doors swung open and hid him from view. The delivery room smelled cleaner than air should. Metal gleamed. Voices layered over each other, purposeful and calm. The nurse at my side said, "We are here, Emily." I nodded, my throat raw, my heart a bruised and beating thing. The doctor's gaze was clear as water. With the next contraction, she said, "We are going to begin." Another wave rose inside me. Somewhere beyond the doors, a phone rang. Somewhere in the waiting room, a man stood. Somewhere on the tray, the plain white envelope lay face down like a secret trying to disappear. "Breathe," the nurse said. I drew in air like it might be my last, and the world tilted toward the edge. The light in the delivery room was too bright to belong to any ordinary hour. It was the kind of white that erased the edges of things, as if the walls were trying to swallow me whole. I could hear the nurses moving with practiced speed, gloves snapping, carts rolling, the quiet beep of monitors. My own heartbeat sounded like it was in my ears, loud enough to drown out everything else. "Focus on your breathing, Emily," the nurse said, her voice firm but kind. "You're doing well." I tried. I tried to anchor myself to her voice, but each contraction was a tide that dragged me somewhere deep. I gripped the side rails of the bed, eyes squeezing shut, and when I opened them again, I caught a glimpse of the doorway before it closed. For a moment, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. There he was, the man from the waiting room, the same one I'd locked eyes with on the way in. He wasn't supposed to be here. He stood just outside the threshold, half-shadowed, as if unsure whether he had permission to cross into this world of sharp voices and raw pain. His gaze held mine, steady and unflinching, and I felt something strange in my chest, a thread of calm, faint but present, woven through the panic. Then the door swung shut, and he was gone. The next hour passed in fragments. Breathing, pushing, voices urging me to keep going. I remember gripping the nurse's hand so tightly my fingers ached. I remember the doctor leaning over me, her eyes serious, telling me we were almost there. I remember the room tilting slightly when they told me to push again, harder this time. And then, just when I thought I couldn't bear it, the cry. It was small and sharp, like the sound of the world breaking open. My baby. I was too weak to lift my head, so they brought her to me. Her skin was warm against mine, her face pink and scrunched, her tiny fists curling into the air. Tears slid down my cheeks before I could stop them. "Hey," I whispered, my voice shaking. "It's you. We made it." But behind the joy was a hollow space. Daniel should have been here. He should have been the first to hold her, to hear that first cry. Instead, there was only the echo of his absence. When they wheeled me to recovery, the corridor was quiet except for the low hum of fluorescent lights. As we passed the waiting area again, I saw him. The stranger. He was standing now, hands in his pockets, watching us. The nurse didn't seem to notice him, but I did. I couldn't look away. We passed close enough that I caught the faint scent of something clean. Soap and rain, maybe. He gave me a small nod, not a smile, just an acknowledgement, as if to say, "I see you." It was such a simple thing, but it felt like a lifeline. The recovery room was dimmer, calmer. My baby slept in the bassinet beside me, her breath soft and even. I closed my eyes, exhausted, but every time I drifted toward sleep, the image of that man returned, sitting alone, standing in the doorway, meeting my gaze. Who was he? Why was he there? Hours later, a soft knock on the door pulled me from a half-dream. The nurse stepped in, and behind her, him. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said, his voice low and careful. I just wanted to see if you're all right." I stared at him, unsure what to say. His presence felt both impossible and inevitable. "Do I know you?" I asked finally. He shook his head. "No, we've never met. But I was here when—" He glanced at the bassinet, then back at me. "I overheard the nurses. About what happened to you. About him leaving." My throat tightened. I hadn't said the words out loud yet. "Why do you care?" It came out sharper than I intended. He didn't flinch. "Because I've seen this before. Because I know what it's like to wait for someone who doesn't come." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The hum of the machines filled the space between us. He stepped closer, but not too close, his eyes steady on mine. "If it's all right, I'd like to help. However you'll let me." I let out a shaky breath. "Why?" His gaze flicked to the baby. "Because no one should start life alone. Not her. Not you." Before I could answer, my daughter stirred, letting out a tiny, questioning cry. He glanced at her, then back at me. "May I?" I hesitated, but something in his expression, open, unguarded, made me nod. He stepped forward, his movements gentle, and lifted her from the bassinet like she was made of glass. She settled in his arms almost instantly, her cries fading to soft breaths. He looked down at her with an expression I hadn't seen from Daniel in months, pure, quiet awe. Then, almost to himself, he murmured, "I'll be the father, if you'll let me." My breath caught. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. I wanted to speak, but the only sound was the steady beep of the monitor, the soft sigh of my daughter in his arms. And then he lifted his gaze, waiting for my answer. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the air vent and the soft rhythm of my daughter's breathing. He stood there holding her, his arms steady, his gaze fixed on the tiny bundle as though the rest of the world had fallen away. "I'll be the father, if you'll let me," he said again, slower this time, as if weighing each word before releasing it. I stared at him, searching for the punchline that never came. "You don't even know me," I managed, my voice sounding smaller than I intended. He looked up then, and there was no trace of a smile, just a kind of quiet conviction that made my chest feel tight. "I know enough," he said. "I know you were left in the worst possible moment of your life. I know you, and this little one deserve better than that." His gaze shifted back to her, and I watched as his thumb traced an invisible line along the edge of her blanket. "And I know I can be here. Right now. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Now. Something in me recoiled, part disbelief, part fear. Why? What do you get out of this? His lips pressed into a thin line. Nothing, he said simply. Nothing but the chance to keep a promise I made to myself a long time ago. I wanted to ask more, to pry into that answer, but my throat tightened. The monitor beside me beeped softly, the green line dipping and rising in steady waves. I shifted, trying to sit up straighter. You can't just step into someone's life like that. It's not that simple. He glanced toward the bassinet and then back at me. No, he admitted. It's not simple. But neither is being abandoned in a hospital bed. And that's already happened. The bluntness stung, but I couldn't deny it. Daniel's absence was a hollow in the room, a shadow that had been stretching since the moment I opened that envelope. The nurse entered quietly, carrying a tray with a fresh jug of water. Her eyes darted between us, lingering a moment longer on him. "Everything all right?" she asked, setting the tray down. "Yes," I said quickly, though I wasn't sure if it was true. She nodded and slipped back out, the door clicking softly shut. He stepped closer, just enough that I could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the kind that come from both laughter and loss. "My name's Michael," he said, as if that might make his offer sound less like a dream and more like something solid. "I know you have no reason to trust me, but I'm not walking out of this hospital without knowing you're okay." I searched his face for anything, any sign of a lie, any twitch of insincerity, but all I saw was a man who looked like he'd been through his own kind of storm. "I don't know what to say," I murmured. "You don't have to decide now," he said. "But let me help tonight. I can sit with her while you rest. You've been through hell. At least close your eyes for an hour." The thought of sleep tugged at me like an undertow. My body ached, my eyelids heavy, but I hesitated. "You could just walk away with her." He didn't flinch. "Then stay awake and watch me," he said. "But you won't see me take one step out that door without your permission." I didn't know what made me nod, exhaustion, instinct, or something in his voice that didn't sound like the others I'd heard promise things they couldn't keep. Carefully, he laid her back in my arms, his hands lingering for a moment, as if reluctant to let go. "Get some rest," he said quietly. "I'll be right here." I closed my eyes, just for a moment, telling myself I wouldn't really sleep. But the next thing I knew, the room was dimmer, the lights lowered, and Michael was still there, sitting in the chair by my bed, his gaze fixed on the bassinet like it was the most important thing in the world. Something about that sight settled deep in my chest, warm and unsettling all at once. And then the door creaked open. A shadow stepped in. I blinked hard, my heart kicking against my ribs, as I realized it wasn't a nurse. The shadow leaned into the doorway, tall enough to block part of the hall light. I tensed, reaching for the call button, but the figure lifted a hand in a quiet, apologetic gesture that softened the edges of my fear. "Evening," she said, stepping into the light. Her badge caught the glow from the monitor. "Night shift supervisor. I wanted to check on you, Emily. Congratulations. Visiting hours technically ended, but I see you have support." Her eyes flicked to Michael. He straightened, still holding the chair like it was a promise. "I can step out if needed," he said. The supervisor glanced at the bassinet, then at my face, reading whatever lived there. "If the patient is comfortable, I am comfortable," she said, a kindness tucked into her tone. "Buzz if you need anything." The door eased shut behind her, leaving the room wrapped in the soft thrum of machines. I let out a breath I had been holding since the hinges creaked. "You should sleep," Michael said gently. "I can sit by the bassinet again." "Or you can sit and talk," I said, surprising myself. "You made an offer that does not belong to this hour. I need to know who you are before I decide anything about anything." He nodded like he had expected this. He pulled the chair closer and sat, elbows on his knees, hands folded. "My name is Michael Hart," he said. "I live 10 minutes from here. I fix old houses for a living. My sister says I collect lost things and make them whole." "That sounds like a story," I said. "It is," he answered, quiet but steady. 2 years ago, I had a wife named Lily. She was 7 months along. We were naming our son after my grandfather. A small, ordinary dream. She had complications, the kind that move fast and punish any plan. I drove too quickly. I ran every red light I could find. It was still not fast enough. The room tilted. I felt the bed under me, the rails, the sheet, the dull ache in my body, the new breath in the bassinet, and all of it arranged itself around his words. "I am sorry," I whispered, the phrase so small against what he had handed me. He nodded once. "Me too." After that, I did not know what to do with my hands. I kept them busy. Houses, fences, roofs. And on days when the world was too quiet, I came here. I bring books to the neonatal wing. I donate blankets in winter. I sit in the waiting room and remember that life keeps arriving whether we are ready or not. He rubbed his thumb along the seam of his jeans, eyes on the bassinet. Tonight, I came to drop off a stack of children's books. I was leaving when the nurse at the desk mentioned a woman whose partner had left her in labor. I do not know why I asked if she was all right. I only know I could not make my feet keep walking. The room hummed. My daughter shifted, a small sigh pressed into the blanket. I felt my throat tighten. "You make it sound so simple," I said. "Like stepping toward someone is always the right thing." "It is never simple," he said. "But sometimes it is right." Silence opened for a few heartbeats. The fluorescent light above the sink buzzed faintly, a small, persistent sound I had not noticed until now. The smell of antiseptic threaded through the air and then faded under the warmer scent of baby shampoo. I shifted in the bed and caught my reflection in the metal of the rail. Eyes red, skin pale, a woman at the edge of something. "What are you really offering?" I asked. Because father is not a headline you can tape onto a story. It is 1,000 days of exhaustion and 1,000 more of trying. "I am offering presence," he said. "I am offering the kind of help that shows up without knocking. Night feedings, early mornings, doctor visits, diaper pails, and grocery lists. I am offering to stand up when a form asks for a name and yours has been left blank. And I am offering all of that with no demand for more than you want to give." "You are a stranger," I said, the truth of it sitting like a stone between us. "I know," he said, "but I am not a danger." "How can I know that?" I asked. "You cannot," he said. "Not yet. So take the time you need. Let me earn whatever trust exists beyond this room." We sat with those words while the monitor drew green hills across its screen. The nurse slipped in, checked a line, tucked the blanket around my daughter's legs, and whispered that she was perfect. She placed a small clipboard on the tray and tapped a rectangle at the top of the form. "When you feel ready," she said, "this begins the birth certificate process. You can leave the father's information blank now and add it later if needed. Just sign your section before morning." Her voice was gentle. The clipboard felt heavier than its plastic weight should allow. After she left, the room seemed to lean toward that small rectangle. I could almost hear its quiet question. Michael watched me pick up the pen. "You do not owe me anything," he said. "What if I do not write any name at all?" I asked, the pen uncapped, its point hovering. "Then you are still enough," he said. "You and her. You are already a family." I stared at the line. The words father's name blinked in my head like a far shore in fog. I saw Daniel's envelope again, the blunt slope of the letters he used when he wrote too fast. I felt the empty space where his hand should have been when she cried for the first time. "Tell me one more thing," I said without looking up. "If I let you help, what happens the first time it is hard? The third time? The 30th? I show up again," he said. "And again. And again. That is the whole promise." He said it without drama. No vow. No theater. Only a sentence placed on the table between us like a warm cup when your hands are cold. I felt a small heat in my chest, unfamiliar and careful. The door clicked softly and opened 2 inches. A shadow stepped into the slice of light. The hinge whispered. A man's voice, lower than a nurse's, spoke my name. "Emily." The pen slipped in my fingers. My daughter stirred, a tiny sound threading through the quiet. Michael turned toward the door, his jaw tightening, his shoulders setting like a frame across a window. The voice came again, closer now, the outline filling the doorway. "I need to talk to you. Tonight." The figure in the doorway stepped forward, and my chest tightened before I even saw his face. But it wasn't Daniel. It was one of the night duty nurses, tall and broad-shouldered, with a gentle expression that melted some of my tension. He had come to adjust the 4 and check on my vitals. Still, that moment, hearing a man's voice call my name from the shadows, had stirred something raw inside me. My heart was still racing when Michael quietly asked, "You okay?" I nodded, even though I wasn't. The nurse finished his work quickly and left, and the door closed with a soft thud. I looked at Michael, who was still sitting in that same chair, posture steady, eyes scanning my face like he was measuring how close I was to breaking. "You need rest," he said again. "Let me stay. You've been through enough for 10 lifetimes in one day." I wanted to say no. I wanted to keep control of something, anything, but exhaustion is a thief, and it had stolen the fight from me. "Fine," I murmured. "But only tonight." He didn't smile or thank me. He just nodded, as if agreeing to a pact. By the next morning, the world felt sharper. I had slept for maybe 3 hours in scattered fragments, but even that felt like a miracle. The discharge papers came faster than I expected, a blur of signatures and instructions. My daughter, my whole world now, was strapped into her tiny car seat, wearing the little knitted hat my mother had made months ago. I still hadn't heard from Daniel. The nurse wheeled me toward the lobby, the car seat perched on my lap. Michael was there, standing near the doors, holding a set of keys. "I'll drive you," he said, as if it was already settled. "You don't have to," I started, but he was already reaching for the handle of the wheelchair. "I know I don't have to. But I will." There was no point in arguing. The hospital's revolving doors swallowed us, spitting us out into the crisp air. It smelled faintly of rain and city traffic, and for a moment I just breathed, holding on to the reality that I was no longer inside those sterile walls. Michael's truck was spotless, unexpected for a man who claimed to fix old houses. He buckled the car seat in with careful precision, double-checking each strap like it was a mission. The drive was quiet at first. My baby made small noises, soft as birdsong. I watched her in the rearview mirror, my chest tightening every time she moved. About halfway home, Michael finally spoke. "You have everything you need there? Formula, diapers, any help?" "I'll manage," I said, though the truth was less certain. He glanced at me briefly, then back to the road. "You don't have to manage alone." I didn't answer. When we pulled into my driveway, the sight of the house hit me harder than I expected. It looked the same as when I'd left, paint peeling slightly near the steps, the porch light still burned out, the curtains closed tight. But somehow it felt smaller now, like the space inside had shifted to fit my new life. Michael carried the bags from the hospital, placing them just inside the door. I stood in the entryway, my baby in my arms, suddenly aware of how quiet the house was. "You should rest," he said. "I can make you something to eat." "You're not staying," I said automatically. I'm not leaving until I know you're settled, he countered, and before I could argue, he was in the kitchen, opening cabinets like he'd been here before. I watched from the doorway as he found a pan, cracked eggs into it, and moved around with quiet efficiency. The smell of cooking made me realize how long it had been since I'd eaten something warm. When I finally sat down with the plate he handed me, I could feel his eyes on me, not in a way that was heavy or demanding, but in a way that said he was making sure I wouldn't fade right there at the table. Afterward, he offered to take the baby so I could shower. I hesitated, but the promise of hot water was too tempting. By the time I came back, wrapped in a robe, he was in the living room rocking her gently, humming under his breath. "She's perfect," he said, not looking up. "She's mine," I replied, and the words felt like armor. The evening came quickly. Michael fixed the broken latch on the back door without being asked. He brought in the mail from the porch and placed it neatly on the counter. Later, when the baby finally fell asleep, I found him sitting on the porch steps, staring out at the street. His shoulders were relaxed, but his eyes were sharp, scanning like he was making sure the night had nothing to threaten us with. "You don't have to guard the house," I said quietly. "Maybe not," he said, "but I will." Something about the way he said it made my skin prickle, not in fear, but in the unsettling awareness that maybe, just maybe, he meant every word. Inside, the baby stirred, and I turned back toward her. By the time I looked again, Michael was still there, watching the street as if it held answers to questions I hadn't yet asked. And somewhere in the distance, unseen in the dark, a car engine started. Morning arrived like a thin sheet of light sliding under the curtains. The house was quiet in a new way, a hush that felt less like emptiness and more like pause. My daughter slept in her bassinet near the couch, her lips making small fluttering movements as if she were tasting the air of this world. I watched her for a long time, counting the gentle rise and fall of her chest, letting the rhythm steady me. Michael had dozed off in the armchair, one ankle crossed over the other, head tilted back. He looked younger in sleep, the lines at the corners of his eyes softened by the kind of peace hard days rarely allow. The hammer and nails he had used last night to fix the back door were lined up neatly on the coffee table, as if waiting for their next assignment. The living room smelled faintly of coffee and cedar from the wooden box he had brought in to prop the window open a sliver. He stirred when the kettle clicked off. I poured tea and offered him a mug. He took it with a quiet thank you, hands wrapping around the heat like it belonged to him. "You should go home," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. "You have a life. A job." "I do," he said. "They can both wait until noon." "How generous," I said, and tried to make it sound like a joke. It fell flat between us and then dissolved into something lighter when he smiled anyway. By mid-morning, I had changed the baby, eaten toast that tasted like a victory, and made a list on the back of a junk mail envelope. Diapers, wipes, lactation tea, dish soap. The list was both too long and not long enough. Michael glanced over it, nodded once, and asked for my keys. "You do not have to shop for me," I said. "I know," he said, and lifted the keys from the hook by the door. "I will be quick." He left, and the house exhaled. I moved room to room, putting small things back where they belonged, discovering other small things that did not have a place anymore. The high chair in the corner of the kitchen looked like a promise waiting for its first attempt. The crib in the bedroom hugged the wall with a tenderness I could feel in my throat. I folded the blue blanket on the end of the bed, smoothed it twice, then left it with a hand pressed flat for a second longer than necessary. A knock came from the porch. I shifted the baby to my shoulder and opened the door to find my neighbor, Grace, standing with a casserole in a foil pan and curiosity tucked into her smile. She is the kind of woman who knows which houses need sugar and which ones need silence. "Welcome home," she said softly. "I heard you had your baby." I stepped back to let her in. The casserole was warm through the foil. She glanced around the living room and then her eyes landed on the bassinet. She is beautiful, Grace said, voice dropping to a whisper as if the walls required reverence. Do you have family staying with you? Just some help, I said. She followed my gaze to the armchair and the folded blanket there. Her smile tilted. I did not know you had family visiting. I did not correct her. I did not know what to call him in a sentence. She tucked her hair behind her ear and lowered her voice. I saw a man leave early this morning. Tall, dark jacket, careful steps. I wondered. People talk on this block, but I do not. Thank you, I said, unsure whether the word meant gratitude for the casserole or the discretion. She set the dish on the counter and scribbled her number on the back of a receipt. Call if you need an extra pair of arms. I have time and I am good at holding tiny storms. She kissed the air close to my cheek and left with a wave that did not demand a reply. The house felt different again. I stood in the kitchen with the phone number in my hand and the baby asleep against my shoulder and wondered how many kinds of help a life could hold without losing its shape. Michael returned before noon with bags that rustled like relief. He unpacked quietly, narrating each item like a low radio. Diapers, wipes, the tea you wanted, soup, bread, a tiny hat I could not resist. Say you will return it if it is wrong. He placed the hat on the counter, a soft knit the color of rain. My chest moved in a way I could not name. After lunch, he fixed the porch light. He tightened the wobbly leg of the dining chair with a block of wood and a patience that looked like prayer. When the baby fussed, he took her with a practiced ease and walked slow circles until her breathing steadied. Where did you learn that? I asked, leaning in the doorway, watching him sway with her, the afternoon light making a halo of dust around his shoulders. Trial and error, he said, and a few late nights that taught me more than any book. He did not say her name. He did not say the word that belonged to his own past, the one with the edges too sharp to hold in daylight. Still, the story he had given me last night wrapped itself around this moment, and I felt a tug inside, part sorrow, part recognition. We took the baby for a short walk around the block just before dusk. The air held a chill that hinted at rain. Leaves winked in the gutter, damp and colorful. People glanced at us and then away because a stroller is a private parade. Grace was trimming a rosebush near her fence and lifted 2 fingers in a greeting that asked no questions. My daughter slept through the entire loop, a small weight that anchored me to the earth. Back home, while I warmed soup and cut bread, I saw Michael on the porch, his back to me, his shoulders hunched slightly as if listening. His hands were in his jacket pockets, but one hand held something. When he turned, I saw it for a second before he slipped it away. A small locket on a chain, the metal worn from touch. What is that? I asked when he came in. A keepsake, he said. Of your wife, I said, softer than I felt. He held my gaze for a long beat, then nodded. Yes. Can I see it? He hesitated, then shook his head. Another time, he said, and it was not a refusal so much as a request for patience. We ate in a silence that was not awkward. The soup was simple and good. We took turns holding the baby while the other had a free hand. The house began to learn our movement, the way rooms do when they are being lived in differently. After dinner, as I was wiping the counter, my phone vibrated on the table. The name on the screen cut the air cleanly. Daniel. I stared at it, the letters bright as a flare. Michael set the dish towel down, his eyes moving from my face to the phone and back again. The phone buzzed again, insistently, a sound that could not be ignored. I swiped to answer and pressed the phone to my ear. The first word out of his mouth was my name, shaped like apology and something else I did not trust. Emily, he said, and my hand tightened around the edge of the counter as the front porch light flicked on by itself and footsteps sounded on the path outside. Daniel's voice through the phone was like an old song I didn't want stuck in my head. Familiar, unwanted, hard to block out. I pressed the device tighter to my ear, glancing toward the porch where footsteps scraped softly against the wood. "I need to see you," he said. His tone was urgent but smooth, the way he used to sound when trying to sell me on some spontaneous weekend trip we couldn't afford. "You already saw me," I said flatly. "In your rearview mirror when you left." There was a pause, a sigh heavy enough to crackle through the line. "I made a mistake, Em. I panicked. I'm sorry." Before I could answer, the footsteps drew closer. Michael stood by the living room window, his eyes fixed on the front walk. "You're not going to believe this," he murmured, nodding toward the glass. I turned my head. Daniel was at the gate. The sight of him was a punch to the ribs. Still in that dark coat, hair damp from the misty air, his jaw tight like he was bracing for a fight. He didn't even glance at Michael, though I was sure he saw him. His eyes were locked on mine, through the pane of glass, as if trying to pin me in place. "Let him in," Daniel said over the phone. "You're already here," I replied, stepping toward the door. My hand hesitated on the lock, and in that hesitation was every unanswered call, every empty chair at my side in the delivery room. When I opened the door, he didn't step inside right away. He stood on the porch, rain clinging to his collar, his gaze darting between me and the bassinet visible just behind my shoulder. "She's beautiful," he said softly, as though the words might undo what he'd done. I didn't move. "She's mine." His throat worked like he was swallowing something sharp. "Ours, Em. She's ours. And I want to be here now. I'm ready. Now." My voice rose before I could stop it. "You're ready now, after you left me alone in a hospital bed with a note?" He flinched but recovered quickly. "I was scared. Michael stepped forward from behind me, his presence suddenly very solid in the doorway. "You were scared," he said evenly. "So you walked out?" Daniel's eyes narrowed. "And you are?" "Someone who stayed," Michael answered. The words hit like a slap, and I saw Daniel's jaw tighten. "Is that what you told her? That you're some kind of hero? Because I know your type. Show up when there's weakness, slide right in, pretend it's about helping." Michael's voice stayed calm. "Pretend? She knows exactly why I'm here. I didn't hide anything." I stepped between them, heart pounding. "Stop. Both of you. This isn't about who gets to puff their chest the highest. This is about her." I glanced back at my daughter, still sleeping, unaware that the air around her was thick with tension. Daniel softened his voice, switching tactics the way I'd seen him do in arguments before. "I can do this, Em. I want to do this. Let me make it right." I didn't answer. My mind was a storm, images of Daniel's absence colliding with the quiet steadiness of Michael's hands when he'd held her for the first time. Michael didn't push, but he didn't leave either. He just stood there, a quiet wall at my side, as if to remind me there was another option. Daniel took a step closer, the damp from his coat brushing against my sleeve. "Just give me a chance," he said. Behind me, the baby stirred, a soft whimper curling into the room. I turned instinctively toward her, but my eyes stayed locked on Daniel's. "Come inside," I said finally, my voice sharper than I intended. As he stepped over the threshold, the air shifted, charged with something that felt like both a reunion and the start of a war. And I knew, this night wasn't going to end cleanly. Daniel crosses the threshold like a man stepping into his own memory. The smell of rain folds in behind him, damp and metallic. He closes the door with a gentleness that feels rehearsed. For a moment, we all stand there, 3 adults and a sleeping child, arranged like a tableau no one knows how to rearrange. "I brought these," Daniel says, lifting a paper bag. "Diapers. A blanket. Formula, just in case." He says just in case like a peace offering. Michael steps back, giving him space. "Good," he says. "She'll go through more than you think." Daniel bristles at the tone. Here's instruction where there is only fact. I catch his eye before he can spit something back. Kitchen, I say. We'll talk there. We move like chess pieces. Michael picks up the baby, the softest thing in the room, and carries her to the bassinet. Daniel follows me into the kitchen, drops the bag on the counter, and stands with his hands on the edge like he might push the house away if it argues with him. I panicked, he starts, voice low. I don't have a better explanation. I got to the parking lot and something snapped. I couldn't breathe. I thought if I walked back in, I would fail you both forever. So I left to fail right then, all at once. You left, I say. The words taste like salt and metal. You wrote a note and you left. He nods, a short, broken thing. And I've hated myself since. I want to fix this. There isn't a fix, I say, not unkindly. There's only next. He stares at the wall clock like it owes him time back. Then let me try the next. We circle the conversation for an hour. He apologizes. He promises. He switches between remorse and strategy. He asks about the baby's name and swallows when I tell him I chose it without him. He asks to hold her, and the question pinches something inside me, because this is also his fault, and still, he is her father. I carry her out of the bassinet and lay her in his arms. His body forgets everything and remembers everything at once. Shoulders tense, then soften. Hands awkward, then sure. He breathes in through his nose like he's trying to memorize the scent of new. She's so small, he whispers. She is, I say, and something inside me leans and refuses to fall. Michael hovers at the doorway, posture neutral, eyes attentive. He isn't in the scene, but he isn't out of it either. He turns a screw in the wobbly dining chair with a slow, careful rhythm, letting the metal speak when no one else should. We make it through that first hour without breaking. We make it to evening with an agreement I don't recognize as such. Daniel will come back tomorrow. He will bring dinner. He will try. Michael nods once when I say it. No argument, no triumph. He wipes sawdust from his hands and says he'll be here after work to fix the hinge on the nursery closet. The next day looks almost like a life. Daniel shows up at noon with takeout containers that steam when opened. He washes his hands without being asked. He changes a diaper, slow, clumsy, but without complaint, then fumbles the snap buttons and swears under his breath while I hide a smile. He offers to burp her, and when she presses a small milk-scented burp into his shoulder, his whole face cracks into unguarded joy. Through it all, Michael moves in the edges. He replaces the porch bulb with a warmer one. He cleans the clogged trap under the sink, the metal sighing when it's free again. He lifts grocery bags out of his truck and lines them on the counter. There is no competition in his movements, only tasks that become done. By late afternoon, fatigue slips under the door and settles in my bones. Daniel finds his impatience where he keeps it, under the shine of wanting to be good. The baby cries in a long, winding line that does not listen to reason, and his jaw tightens with every minute. What does she want? He asks, pacing. I fed her. I changed her. What else could it be? Sometimes babies just cry, Michael says from the doorway, voice mild. Daniel's head snaps up. Thank you for the wisdom, he says, sarcasm like a blade. Do you have a manual too? Only the kind you write while reading her, Michael answers. He doesn't rise to it. He never does. I take the baby and press her against my chest, sway until her crying softens to a tired protest. Michael brings me water. Daniel stares at the floor, grinding his teeth into patience. We survive the fussy hours and the dinner that comes late because life does. The house learns the shape of 3 sets of footsteps. It learns the rhythm of passing the baby hand to hand, of one voice rising when another sinks. For a moment, I let myself imagine this could become a braid instead of a tug of war. Then evening arrives with its insistence. The baby sleeps. The house lowers its shoulders. Michael moves to the porch for air. Daniel lingers in the living room, hands in his pockets. His eyes snag on something on the coffee table, a small chain peeking from under a folded cloth. He reaches before I can say wait. His fingers lift the locket into the light. The chain dangles, catching the lamp glow. He pops it open with his thumbnail. "What is this?" he asks, but it isn't a question. The picture inside is small and worn, a woman with soft eyes and a curve of belly that cannot be mistaken for anything but promise. "Michael's," I say. Daniel looks up, suspicion rushing into his face like a weather change. Of course he has a tragic backstory. "Put it down," I say, the request hardening. "It's not yours." He ignores me, turns the locket toward the light, then toward the door. Michael steps in, sees the metal in Daniel's hand, and stops. "That is mine," he says, voice even, quiet as the space between heartbeats. Daniel snaps it shut and fists it like a challenge. "You leave keepsakes on her table? You sleep in her chair? You play the saint? What exactly is your angle?" "Daniel," I warn. "My angle is upright and steady," Michael says, "so she can rest against it when she needs to." Daniel laughs once, a sound with no humor in it. "Right, upright and steady. Until it gets hard. Until you get bored of somebody else's mess." Michael does not move. I am not bored. Daniel closes the distance in 2 strides, the locket flashing between them like a coin about to be called. "You think you can replace me," he says, breath hot with the heat he's been holding back. "Is that what this is?" "I do not replace people," Michael answers. "I repair what they break." The sentence lands between them like a dropped plate. For a second, no one breathes. I step forward, pulse thrumming in my neck. "Stop. Both of you." Daniel turns, eyes sharp, voice soft in that dangerous way. "You have to choose, Em," he says. "You can't have us both in this house. Not like this." The room pulls tight. The air goes thin. Somewhere outside, thunder grumbles like a throat clearing. The baby stirs, sensing the shift even in sleep. Rain begins, a soft patter against the window that grows teeth. The porch light flickers once, twice, then steadies. Daniel lifts the locket, still in his hand. "Is this what you want? A ghost on a chain and a handyman for a father." Michael's jaw works, but he doesn't step forward. He waits, the way he always waits for me to decide the shape of my own life. I open my mouth, heartbeat in my tongue, the word no or yes gathering like a storm behind my teeth. And the front door handle turns from the outside. The sound of the handle turning sliced through the thick air like a blade. For a moment, none of us moved. The rain outside hissed against the porch roof, and the metallic click of the latch was louder than it should have been. Daniel's shoulders stiffened, and his hand clenched tighter around the locket. Michael shifted slightly, angling himself toward the doorway, not to block it, but to be ready. I found myself halfway between them, my pulse climbing so high it felt like it was in my ears. The door swung inward slowly, and a figure stepped inside. It wasn't a stranger. It was Grace, my neighbor. She stood in the entryway with her hair damp from the rain, clutching an umbrella in one hand and something wrapped in a grocery bag in the other. But her eyes, wide, scanning the 3 of us, said she knew she had walked into something she wasn't meant to see. "I knocked," she said quietly. "But I guess no one heard me." She stepped forward, holding out the bag toward me. "I made cookies. Thought you could use something sweet." Her smile wavered when her gaze flicked to Daniel, then to Michael, and back to me. "Thank you," I said, trying to keep my voice even. My hands were shaking, so I set the bag on the counter without looking inside. Grace lingered. "It's really coming down out there," she said. "I saw a car idling near the corner. Been there a while." Daniel's eyes darted to the window, a flash of unease passing over his face. "What kind of car?" he asked. She shrugged. "Dark sedan. Couldn't see the driver." Michael moved toward the front window, pulling the curtain back just enough to peek outside. "It's still there," he said after a beat. "Lights on. Engine running." The room went still again. Grace shifted uncomfortably. "I should go." "No," I said quickly. "Stay. Just for a minute." Daniel glanced at me, then at Michael. "You expecting someone?" I shook my head. "No one." The rain intensified, drumming against the glass. The baby stirred in her bassinet, a soft whimper that rose in the tension. I went to her, lifting her gently into my arms, feeling her warmth seep into me like a shield against whatever was building here. Michael stepped back from the window. "Whoever it is, they're not moving, just watching." "Watching what?" Daniel demanded. Michael's eyes met mine. "Maybe not what. Maybe who." Grace swallowed. "I can stay here tonight if you want. Keep an eye out from across the street." "I don't like the look of it." Daniel shook his head sharply. "No, I'll stay." He looked at me then, his voice low but firm. "I should be here. I am her father." Michael didn't flinch. "And I am the one who knows how to keep trouble away from this door." Their words tangled in the air, heavy and sharp. I felt the pull of both, Daniel's claim by blood, Michael's claim by action. And underneath it all, the low, steady hum of rain and the car engine in the distance, like a presence neither of them could control. Grace set her umbrella by the door and stepped back, clearly reading the tension. "I'll go," she murmured, "but call me if anything changes." When she left, the door shut softly, but the silence inside was anything but gentle. Daniel moved closer to me. Michael stayed near the window, his eyes never leaving the street. "Whoever that is," Daniel said, "they're going to be a problem." "They're only a problem if we let them get close," Michael replied. I rocked my daughter slowly, her small breaths brushing my collarbone. "Then what do we do?" Michael's gaze shifted to me. "We wait. We watch. And we don't open that door for anyone else tonight." Daniel took a step toward the window, finally standing shoulder to shoulder with him. They didn't speak, but the air between them had shifted, less like enemies, more like uneasy allies staring at the same unknown. Outside, the car's headlights flared for a second, slicing across the front of the house, then dimmed again. Whoever was inside wasn't leaving. Not yet. And I had the sinking feeling they weren't here for cookies. The rain had slowed to a whisper by the time the clock in the hallway struck 12. The house felt like it was holding its breath, every creak of the old floorboards louder than usual. My daughter slept in her bassinet, her tiny fists curled, her breathing deep and even. I stayed near her, one hand on the edge, rocking her gently without waking her. Michael and Daniel remained in the living room, an uneasy truce drawn between them. Michael sat near the window, eyes scanning the street. Daniel leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, every muscle wound tight. Neither man spoke, but the silence was charged, like they both knew the moment wouldn't last. Outside, the dark sedan still idled at the corner. Its headlights had been off for hours, but every so often, I could see the faint glow of a cigarette ember from the driver's side. Whoever it was, they had no intention of leaving. Then came the knock. It wasn't loud. Just 3 slow raps against the front door, deliberate and patient, like the person on the other side already knew we'd answer. Michael stood instantly, moving toward the door without a sound. Daniel straightened, his jaw locking. "Don't open it," he said under his breath. Michael didn't reply, but he didn't stop either. He stood to the side of the door, his ear near the wood. "Who is it?" Silence. He tried again, louder. "Who's there?" Still nothing, until a voice finally came, low and male, with an accent I couldn't place. "You've got something of mine." Every nerve in my body went cold. I glanced at Daniel, whose expression had gone from tense to alert, eyes narrowing like he recognized the voice. "What do you want?" Michael asked. "You know," the man replied. "Give it back, and I'll leave." Daniel shifted, and that's when I noticed his fist tightening around something in his pocket. The locket. My stomach twisted. "It's not yours," Michael said. A short, humorless laugh came from the other side of the door. "Everything's for sale if you want it bad enough." Michael's hand hovered over the lock, but he didn't turn it. He looked at me over his shoulder, his eyes asking a silent question. "Do you trust me?" I swallowed hard and nodded. Michael took a slow breath, then spoke through the door. "You need to leave. Now." There was a pause, then the voice changed, quieter, sharper. "You don't want me coming back." Footsteps retreated across the porch. A car door opened and closed. The sedan's engine roared to life, tires hissing over wet pavement as it rolled away into the night. We all stayed frozen for a moment, listening to the sound fade. Finally, Daniel exhaled, his shoulders dropping. "You don't know who that was." Michael turned toward him. "And you do." Daniel hesitated, then nodded once. "Let's just say, he's not the kind of man you ignore. And if he wants that locket, there's a reason." Michael's gaze hardened. "It's mine, and I'm not giving it up." I looked between them, my heart pounding for a dozen different reasons. "What's in that locket?" I asked. Michael's eyes met mine, steady but unreadable. "The only thing I have left from the life I lost." Daniel shook his head, muttering under his breath. "Then you've just put all of us in the middle of something we can't walk away from." The baby stirred, letting out a soft cry. I went to her, scooping her up and holding her close, feeling the rise and fall of her breath against me. In the living room, the two men stood facing each other, not as rivals now, but as two people who had just realized they might have to stand on the same side. Somewhere in the dark, the rain started again, and I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The rain had stopped by morning, leaving the air heavy with the smell of wet earth and the faint metallic tang of the night before. Light seeped in through the kitchen window, muted and gray, casting soft shadows over the counters. My daughter stirred in her bassinet, her tiny hands opening and closing as if grasping at dreams she couldn't yet keep. Michael was the first one up. I heard the soft clink of a mug against the counter, the low hum of the kettle. He didn't say a word, just moved through the kitchen like he'd been here for years. Daniel, on the other hand, sat at the table, his elbows on the wood, staring at nothing. His eyes were bloodshot, not from lack of sleep, but from the weight of thoughts he hadn't shared. The locket lay in the center of the table. No one touched it. It seemed smaller in the daylight, but no less dangerous. I could feel the tension it carried, like a stone dropped into still water, ripples reaching out to touch us all. When I walked in, both men looked up. Michael's gaze was steady, a quiet question in his eyes. Daniel's was different, restless, conflicted, almost pleading. I sat between them, not because I wanted to, but because it felt like that's where I had been placed, as if by some invisible hand. "We need to talk about last night," Michael said, his voice calm but unshakable. Daniel rubbed his palms together. "We don't. We need to make a decision. Whoever that man was, he's not done. And if he wants what's in that locket, we're all in his way now." I glanced at the locket, then at Michael. "You still haven't told me what's inside." He hesitated. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. But then he leaned forward, his voice dropping so low I had to strain to hear. "It's a photograph. My wife. She was pregnant when she disappeared. That man at the door, he's connected to it. I know it." Silence hung between us. The baby shifted, making a small sound that pulled me back to the present. Daniel looked at me then, his voice softer. "You need to decide who stays here, Em. Because when that man comes back, and he will, it's going to matter." I didn't answer. I just looked at both of them, the weight of their presence pressing in from either side. Outside, a car passed slowly down the street, its tires hissing over the wet pavement. And even though the sun had come up, it felt like night hadn't truly ended. Somewhere out there, the man with the cigarette was still watching, still waiting. And the quiet we were sitting in was only the beginning.